We are back with more NFL coverage, and in this one, I'll be covering the results and outcomes of everything that happened at the annual league meeting over the past couple days prior to this recording per the NFL website, because all of that information is going to come from there. Now, from what I had read initially about it, it looked as though most of the initial proposals outlined by me in a couple of recaps ago did end up passing. However, the most notable one that didn't pass, if you review everything, is that shitty ass proposal that the Browns put in the first place. Adam Schefter reported on it, and a number of other sources did. But yeah, the Browns themselves decided that, you know what, we're just going to back out of making this proposal entirely. Their idea initially was to force teams to have their first round draft picks as available trade pieces up to 5 years out, up to a maximum of 5 years out. The limit was for that existing at this point of time, and still to this point will continue, is much smaller in terms of the amount of years that you can use on an existing draft pick in your arsenal to facilitate a trade or maybe help your chances of making one work out for you. The Browns were doing this, and as I already explained when covering that initial proposal, we understand what the hell the Browns have done to themselves. They put themselves in this position. Nobody else was clamoring for this shit. They wanted to save their own fucking face because they knew how badly they fucked up to the Deshaun Watson trade. And then you have all the rumblings about the fact that this nigga can still be a starter for the team because they have no other choice, because you paid him $230 million guaranteed while he was in the middle of what? That was their decision. And again, it was warranted. The talent was there, maybe. The reputation, questionable as shit, but the talent was there. They bought into that, and they got a nice taste of karma right back in the fucking mouth with a counterpunch. It's as simple as that. So you get the result of all that, and then you just decide, hey, okay, let's make this easier on ourselves so that we don't screw up anything like this again. It didn't have anything to do with the amount of years in advance that you could use for these picks in a trade. Had nothing to do with that at all. But they want to make it seem that way because inadvertently, the draft capital that they lost ended up benefiting pretty much everybody else that it was dispersed out to. And if Deshaun Watson had played well enough to warrant it, you'd probably be in the same position that Les Snead would be considering right now when he says, fuck them picks. Because Watson's talent would be, in theory, leading the Browns to some form of relevance. Thank goodness that's only theoretical for pretty much everybody else involved. I can imagine that the conversation surrounding this, when it came to the league meeting, there were probably a few conversations about it between the Browns, at least just pitching the idea out there in front of everybody, or at least maybe there was a little bit of a slideshow kind of thing, having everybody run through, go over the proposals in full form one more time to at least get on the same page about it. And when they came around to the Browns at that point, each and every other owner said their piece and said it well, quite frankly, to make the Browns want to concede. Because it's not like, let's be honest with ourselves, it's not like that just comes from absolutely nowhere. There had to be some kind of dialogue in regards to this, in some form of consensus beforehand from other officials in the NFL, other owners, general managers of the team, etc., coming to a conclusion that, hey, if this does get put to a vote, more than likely we're not going to vote in favor of this. And at that moment, you probably heard a large crowd of noises that would go against this if it came down to a vote. Ultimately, it shut the Browns off at that point. Because at that point, why even bother putting it up to a vote when each and every other owner, for the most part, is going to vote against you? There's no reason for it. And hey, that's how you know it was a stupid idea in the first place. So promptly, it got shut the hell down so that you don't waste anybody else's time with this. Because at the end of the day, that is a decision you made on your own accord. It had nothing to do with you potentially doing even more damage to your future in the long haul. You already screwed that up yourselves in the short term. That, even if you add a couple more years onto these limits, it doesn't make a fucking difference. It just delays the inevitable for you. And there's no guarantee as well that, we're just going to have a hard measure in terms of the cap of years that we can trade this out. You have to do that job well. It's not a guarantee. It's not like you're going to hit on each and every single draft pick that you get, even if we are a few years down the line. That is never going to be of 100% likelihood. There is always something that can shift within that time. For any player, for any team direction, anything in the next few years. You think you're just going to magically get your hands on a stud talent if you do get a hold of a draft pick that's 5 years down the line? Hell, perfect model. Yeah, you can do this in the NBA where you see everything surrounding these goddamn 2029, 2031 first round picks. You don't know what these players are going to project to be. They're fucking middle schoolers. Now, the NBA, obviously, there's a lot of different language there, and that's why they operate in that way to where you can trade those draft picks as far out as possible. That's what I guess the Browns were trying to model in a way by proposing this. But, no. You dug your own grave, essentially, in this regard. You're not getting away with that shit. You're still feeling those effects, and you're going to feel them for the long haul. Which, again, sucks for a Browns fan base that has had to deal with this pretty much since their reinstatement into the NFL as a team. That's how shitty it's been for them, for the most part. And just when they were getting a sign of life, a sign of change, maybe, in the right direction, you fucking niggas had to strip it all away. Just because you wanted to reach in for the fool's gold. And luck, at that junction, was not on your side. In the least. But to get off that note, and progress into the ones that were passed, the rules and proposals that did make it through for approval by the general consensus on that panel in Arizona over the last couple of days. So to get straight into it, for all of the playing rules for this upcoming season, all 5 that were mentioned as just proposals the last time that I discussed this, all passed, all were approved. To start it out, the first 3 are genuinely focused on the kickoff. The first one, as previously explained by me and made by the competition committee, the kicking team is able to declare an onside kick at any time during the game. And again, just the idea of creating more freedom there rather than having to save it for strictly and solely the fourth quarter changes a lot. Now, when you look at some of the greatest comebacks that we talk about all the time in the NFL circles, the 28-3 comeback victory in Super Bowl 51 by the Patriots. Leave the video, Falcons fans. The 33-0 comeback pulled off by the Vikings in overtime. Those didn't always come down to the onside kicks. Those were generated when you look back on them, when you watch through that game tape. Yes, these teams, the Falcons and the Colts, both Matt Ryan led at the time, decided for whatever reason to keep their aggressive game plan going in the second half of these games. And it came down to quick 3-and-out possessions and those that lasted less than 2 minutes, kind of tying in together, allowing these opposing defenses a bit more time to rest as their offense continued to churn out efficient drive after efficient drive. While they struggled to get it done in the first half, once they got in that rhythm, it was almost as if they couldn't be stopped. You get a little overconfident, and bam, slowly but surely, both of those teams, the Pats and the Vikings, ended up winning those respective games. However, that method to success is not always something that can lead to victory, and it can look different in so many ways. When you are trailing by that many points in any contest, there is a natural desire there, in a sense, to want to string together as many possessions as possible and as quickly as you possibly can. And what better way to at least attempt to do this than go for an onside kick? At least test the waters. See if you can steal that momentum away within an instant and not have to worry about potentially getting down the field scoring and then having to give the ball back to the other team, even for a brief period of time, even if you do get the 3-and-out. Every single second matters in that kind of comeback attempt. Now, all teams as well, you have to understand, are not going to be down by that much as long as they're on their A game. You would hope that they are not down by that much. But again, it just gives you a load of things to think about. And so having an onside kick take place at any time makes sense. Now, the element of surprise, as it's understood, might not be there like it was in that, onside kick called by Sean Payton in the Super Bowl. That was something that truly nobody was expecting. The Colts were completely caught off guard by that. And this is after halftime. First play of the third quarter. You, by declaring it automatically, kind of put all that to rest, because the other team at that point, even if it's still not expected, they're going to at least have the common knowledge. They're going to be notified of the fact that, hey, you are going for an onside kick. So taking that away from the entire thing and still not having that be a part of it could be an issue in time. But the just idea of having that asset once again in full, rather than having to wait until the final quarter, and previously I think it was like the final 2 minutes of the fourth quarter even. You're trying to get this done. And now you're trying to avoid it coming down to that if you can control it and do something about it. So it made sense for them to kind of revert back to this, if you will, a little bit. According to the competition committee again, the kicking team's incentive to intentionally kick the ball out of bounds when kicking off from the 50-yard line was also confirmed and approved. But again, I think my stance still stands, as I previously stated when talking about the proposal itself. Like, the language is still just a little weird to me. The receiving team, if they, for example, with what I'm talking about, if they field the ball and it's going near the sideline, with the chance for them to still get both their feet in bounds and secure the fair catch that way, and they decide to step out of bounds to trigger a free possession in a better starting field position, they would have more incentive than the kicker in that situation to force this to happen. I don't really get the language in that sense. And also in terms of 50-yard kicks from the 50-yard line, the main point of time from my thinking, I guess just in real time here, because it wasn't always understood on my end, but I guess in a situation where an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty is called on the offense after a touchdown, probably in regards to some form of taunting with these weak-ass calls on that shit by the referees, and we'll get to that in a second, that will trigger a 15-yard penalty on the kick in some occasions. And so that would be a scenario where, okay, you have a team kicking from the 50-yard line. The context matters. I mean, if the team is, in this scenario, they're within the final 2 minutes, they have a lead that's shorter than a single possession, to force them to drive further down the field, possibly from the 20-yard line instead of the 35, yeah, they will boot that shit outside of the landing zone and straight out of bounds through the back of the end zone, not just straight up out of bounds, because that will go down at that point as a touchback. So I guess from that sense, that's what they're talking about. Yet still, even if you want to go and approach it that way, my sentiment expressed when talking about this in the proposal still reigns the same, and it's a genuine question. How does one define intentionality in this situation? Because if you're kicking from the 50-yard line and you're booting this straight out of bounds, sometimes you don't always have the full control of motion there to ensure that it lands within the boundary line and to ensure that a kick returner has an opportunity to get their hands on the ball here. Like, literally. Yes, in some cases, they may just decide to boot it all the way out of the end zone. That can be a lot of work to strategically get it in play. Like that, it takes so much specificity to get that done. If you're a kicker in that situation, you have to be so precise with your motion, knowing that your power's good, knowing that your angle of trajectory you get off the ball on the kick is good enough to land within that space. But I literally, in some of these other cases, you're telling me that a player can be docked for this simply because their leg is too strong? Just think about that shit for a second. If it's going out of bounds and you have a kicker like a fucking Cam Little who can boot the shit out of the fucking ball deep. We've seen it on field goals. Who's to say that he won't kick a ball 60 yards down the field from the 50-yard line and out of the end zone because of that being his natural power? That is not something that you can control or dictate as a ref in that situation. You're not in the player's shoes here. You're not releasing the ball or having to release the ball from that point of the field. That is not a physical experience that you're counting on having as well, being a referee. So I just find it weird still that you're trying to outlaw this. Because it's like, what is the tell for them at that point? And hey, I mean, maybe it is something to be tested out. Of course, these rules aren't always going to be mainstays. You know, they can be tested after a year and revised, revisited in the next annual league meeting. That's how this goes. It could be a good trial run to have. But I'm going to genuinely be interested to see, if nothing else, exactly what the hell it is that they're looking for in this specific playing rule. Because I don't know for them how exactly you define or perceive something like this to be occurring intentionally. But that's just me. And then the third rule relating to kicks deal with the alignment requirements for the receiving team players in the setup zone. There's going to be a modification to it. So I suppose when it comes to the different formations, they'll sort out a way to at least alter it for the next season. And a number of different teams have, called a different number of formations in this regard, honestly. Sometimes they'll have 2 players back. Sometimes they'll have a single player back. Sometimes they'll try to run the occasional trick play here and there. And I guess this could either, in terms of modifying it, the language could change. They could expand the amount of available formations you can use as a team. They could eliminate a few of these formations that they might deem illegal and in the player safety realm unsafe, and go from there. The fourth rule, approved by the annual league meeting and the panel, is also from the competition committee. And this allows league personnel to consult with on-field officials when considering disqualifications for both flagrant football acts and non-football acts without being called on the field. According to NFL.com, as well as a number of other sources. And the main sticking point in regards to this rule, per Adam Schefter and other posts, was that infamous incident between DK Metcalf and that Lions fan in that game last season with a wig on. You got the shit slapped out of him because apparently he said something. We still have no idea what it was to this point. He said something, potentially. DK Metcalf, whatever the case might have been, was a little triggered. And he, that happened. But in real time, if you remember that play, he wasn't immediately ejected in that moment. The only way we understood that something like this is going down is because the TV crew, CBS, those camera guys caught that. And they decided to show it in post after they came back from commercial. This was not discovered by the league themselves in the moment. And with that, they couldn't act on it. They had no idea. You probably have some other people around the place just clamoring for this to be an ejection, but they did not catch it in time, and so they couldn't make the call. But now, with having other league personnel around, now they have the okay to, if they're in the area, if they catch wind of something or the other going down that might be deemed as not necessarily conduct detrimental to the team, but unsportsmanlike, maybe on a level that does put somebody in harm's way, they have the right to make the final decision and assist the referee in that regard. So that's the context for that one. When you take that into consideration, it does make a lot of sense. And then the fifth rule for the competition committee confirmed to me that they absolutely are conceding that they've lost this labor dispute and are going to have another ref strike, essentially, if you will, because they approved that for 1 year only, the NFL officiating department can correct clear and obvious mistakes, or allow the department to correct these clear and obvious mistakes made by on-field officials that impact the game in the event that there is a work stoppage involving the game officials represented by the NFL Referees Association. And when you hear that, when you hear about a referee strike and them potentially being out of jobs, that can only mean one thing. You have to go back to 2012 for the last time that there were replacement refs in the league. And hey, to trigger all you Packers niggas, all you Packers fans, hey, all this time later, going on 14 years, Golden Tate III caught that fucking ball. We all know it. We all know it. It was obvious. You could smell it from a mile away. There was absolutely nothing rigged about the call whatsoever. They got the call right once they convened about it, those replacement guys, and they got the deal done. We know what happened there. It's okay. But that joke aside, and all that aside, the fact that this is now coming up again? Really? If those models from 1987 and 2012 shows you anything, served as any piece of important history to reference for you in this regard, you'd be a lot better about handling this situation. Genuinely, why would you want to deal with replacement refs again? Like, even if you're allowing the officiating department to intervene and serve as another way to assist these guys, especially if they don't know what the hell they're doing, you want to have your product tampered with like this by third parties of this kind? I just really don't understand how you're falling into that same trap, and we're in 2026. That's insane. That's insane, man. But I guess when you're in a situation like this, you do have to take matters into your own hands. And this is the result of the overall dispute and some other things that have been made out during this time. Like, I was reading through and looking at a few other things. Bruh, they were mentioning a fucking pool, a fucking prospect or sort of minor league teaching school for refs. And the chance for guys to be demoted and called up in real time. Now again, that concept is actually something that does take place in MLB, as I did find out some time ago. They do have that, the ump school thing. And again, in the same way, it'll take years for an umpire in that situation to break through and actually get their shot in the majors. And there is still room for them to make as much air as possible, even with the ABS in this year. Like, for example, good example here, Jen Powell became the first woman to be named as an umpire in an MLB game last season. And I'm pretty sure that she is still serving out that role right now across other MLB games this season. It took her several years to get through ump school herself before getting the call up. And you factor in that duration of time combined with the fact that, again, a woman had not filled out this position before. So that is just double the pressure there. She got it done. She broke through. And honestly, she seems to be doing a pretty fine job. Like, she's obviously gotten talked about being put in this position as a sort of trailblazer. But in terms of, and especially to some other umpires, when it comes to these incorrect calls and these errant misses behind the plate, she hasn't necessarily been called out for those kinds of mistakes to this point. I haven't heard it. If there have been some, I haven't heard it. And that's a good thing. Because the last thing you want to do is be in a situation, if we're going to compare some refs here, oh dear. Hey, for all you MLB fans, okay? We see what the hell happened to Angel Hernandez and how he literally had to retire with the sheer weight of the bad calls that he had in the MLB last season in over years. There are some NFL refs that can definitely say that they are nearing that territory. And although this guy in particular might not be as completely inaccurate as Angel Hernandez was, but when it comes down to the controversial calls, oh my gosh. You think about Angel Hernandez and Jim Joyce, you think about Bill fucking Vinovich if you are an NFL fan. All three of them niggas are in the same boat in regards to the weight of these calls and the fact that they've served as referees and umpires for all this damn time. And there is still so much controversy, so much polarity around these people as figures in their respective sports because of the types of calls that take place under their leadership of the crew. Now again, if this is a dispute, you're not going to see Vinovich there. And he's had some pretty bad calls that have been well documented. Since he's been in the NFL, you can only imagine how much worse that material would get with a backup who truly doesn't understand the game and the full rule book themselves. So again, it makes sense. And to my point about it not necessarily being a mainstay, this is only for a year. But hey, once this year is done, if they do truly resort to replacement refs, oh man, just like those past couple instances, they will very much miss having their genuine crew of refs calling these games. Because if it's already controversial as hell with that established unit, oh goodness, it's going to be 10 times worse. All right, so for the approved bylaws, going into this section, in the same way, it looks as if all three that I explained and that were released as potential proposals in the first go-round were also approved. First one, from the Competition Committee, amended Article 17, Section 17.1 of the Constitution and bylaws to permit the league office to adjust the procedures and related dates and deadlines for the final roster reduction to accommodate an international game scheduled in the first week of the regular season. And again, this will focus intently on the game in Brazil and on the game in Melbourne, which again makes sense, especially for the Melbourne game. You, again, as I said in the last video, the second you call up that game, specifically understanding just how long it's going to take for these teams to travel there, on top of getting everything worked out logistically with the rations that you need, with the equipment that you need on deck, and backup equipment just for security measures, the fact that you have to get some of these family members of these players over there safe and sound, that's a lot. And to have anything of that sort left or have anything unconfirmed and unaccounted for when you leave for that flight to send you across the fucking world and ocean, that's going to be a major hassle. So you have to have this secured right then and right there. It is as simple as that. Whatever we have to do. If some of these deadlines have to be knocked out before, we want to make sure that the on-field product is as good as possible. And one of the better ways to do that is to have each and every single one of these deadlines met point blank, period. And it's not like it's going to be something that just fucks over one team and helps another, benefits another. No, you've got to meet the same deadline at the same time, no matter what. All hands on deck, a unified effort to ensure that we get over there and do what we need to do to put on the best possible showcase for these fans. And to make sure that our own players and personnel are taken care of in the ways that they need to be. Also, factoring in all of the different media and things like that, you have to get there a few days in advance. You're going to go through some press runs. You're going to go through some conferences and meetings with some personnel from the team. You're going to have time to make that happen. And you're probably going to want to save that for when you get to these places. Instead of having to take that footage, record it in the U.S., and then risk having such a long delay of getting it sent over to where it needs to be at in another country entirely. So that had to be sorted out. The second rule is also by the Competition Committee, and it also amended Article 17, Section 18.1b of the Constitution and bylaws to establish the Saturday and Sunday of Labor Day weekend as business days to provide clubs with personnel notices during the first weekend after the roster reduction. I pretty much said everything I needed to about that one in the last one as well. I understand, hey, Labor Day, you're trying to celebrate the country, fine, whatever. Grill your fucking hot dogs, disgusting, all right? Load up on the fucking Franks and just go to town, I guess. I don't fucking know, but look, put all that shit to the side. You got a job to do. And it ties in again, as I mentioned, with the first rule. Because as they stated over this course of time, in something that, again, I'm not going to dive too deep into, but hey, just like the Eagles opened up last season on Thursday Night Football, being the defending Super Bowl champions, the Seahawks are also going to do the same thing, this time on a Wednesday, as the Super Bowl champions in Seattle. Making sure that you have everything set for the most part logistically, at least a few good days before we even get to that first game, is important. And definitely a week out for those teams that play later in the week. Because, again, at that point, you're nearing the NFL season. Barring anything crazy. With everything that you can control, it should be in order already. You shouldn't just be figuring some of this stuff out and finalizing some of these rosters at this particular point. And if you are, note it. Put it in. Don't hide that information from us. Because, hey, they will investigate you. They'll investigate you. And if they find something on you, it's going to be a problem. You know that. And then, third bylaw approved by the Competition Committee also will permit players on reserve and physically unable to perform lists to begin a 21-day practice period after the club's second game of the regular season. Yeah. Hey, man. Again, a lot of teams especially when rolling over from the previous season. Some guys who have suffered debilitating injuries to this point, especially if they are core players, this is absolutely going to, at least in theory, benefit a team in this position because you're getting one of those core players back. Now, of course, you'd still want them to be fully healthy before they make that return. But hey, in some of these cases with teams that are trying to get back on the right track after a tough season last year, maybe they have some younger talent playing that needs some assistance from a veteran presence of that kind who might be out. To have them on the field in some way and able to perform alongside them can be a good measuring stick and a good foundation to set as these guys try to usher in their roles and get their feet wet in the NFL as rookies or potential second, third year players, maybe some rejuvenated players. Or also, again, trying to settle into a new team, trying to figure out how the scheme works and all of that good stuff. And the last thing they would want is to be in that position, be on maybe a prove-it deal and injured, be on your last leg and injured, than having just terrible chemistry as a roster to start out a year. Of course, there's a lot that factors into that, but the main step in the stepping stone, honestly, is to just be out there in the first place and able to suit up for your roster. And sometimes, for some teams, that's all the difference. And then, for the only approved resolution again, the fucking bullshit from the Browns aside, they voted yes on Pittsburgh's proposal to make permanent the change implemented in the 2025 season that permits clubs to have one video or phone call with no more than 5 prospective unrestricted free agents during the 2-day negotiation period, and to permit clubs to make travel arrangements with such players upon agreeing to terms. End quote. Per NFL.com. Again, you feel a little fishy about their motivation to get that done. But I digress. Again, it's smart. As I stated in my last recap, touching on this particular rule. Well, a few recaps ago, I should say. If you're really seeking out someone like that, who is a top-end talent, or maybe a diamond in the rough, that you just know from a scheme perspective would fit well on your roster, you're naturally going to want to do everything in your power to influence the move to your team and sway the momentum in your direction. And you really do not want all of the outside noise to creep in from allowing you to send it fully and go all out for the move and the player in question. Now again, hey, at least 5, free agents can be talked with here, and clubs, hey, if there is this negotiation period, hey, you only get one shot. You get one fucking shot. So if it's somebody that you're really seeking out, hey, you better get in your fucking bag. You better truly put on a great presentation and actually do a good job as well of convincing them to want to join your organization. You don't half-ass it. You don't short sell them on all of the positives that you can get out of him and he can get in terms of resources from the organization in question. Don't lie. Don't flat out lie either. Because if you suck, if you're ass, unless there's a genuine tie there that this player is looking for, chances are he's not going to want to join your team. Don't waste his time. Don't try to sugarcoat it. Be honest. Be honest. Tell that man he's going to be a starting caliber quarterback, all right? And then sell that dream to him. And proceed to I'll get into that. Yeah, it's just you can't lie to these players in this situation either. In this day and age, they're going to see right through it. It might not take a lot to convince some, but for some others. Hey, they might not be as enthused. It might take a lot more to push them in that direction. Again, just one time. Just one fucking time. Handle your business. Put in the maximum effort and then some. Simple as that. All right. Well, that'll do it for that portion of the video specifically in regards to the annual league meeting. There was another thing as well that came out, I guess, in tandem with it. And I guess I should have fully read into it more. But it was interesting. There was a report from Adam Schefter and other sources that apparently each team has been approved to reside at least one mental health physician in their club. At least one. Or at least, that was the order. Just one mental health physician in each club. Now again, when looking at the comment section under it directly, hey, somebody made the point that this should have already existed. Yes. Yeah. It took you a 4-month span of just absolute tragedies with these players to then finally decide that, hey, you know what? Okay, this noise is getting too loud. We'll put in somebody to assist these people. How much longer were you going to wait for that exactly? You didn't make the move initially with Marshawn Nealand. In that unfortunate situation, you didn't make it with Rondell Moore in that unfortunate situation. And then you have a slew of just things piling up. We've talked about the Darren Lee thing. We've talked about the James Pierce Jr. situation. And that's still ongoing. We haven't. And honestly, I'm just like, bro, I'm reading it. I'm seeing what's going on. This Puka Nacua situation is now taking another turn to where he himself is actively in rehab as a result of, honestly, whatever the fuck is going on there. All of this is unfolding, and you now finally decide to make this call. I just don't know what exactly they were waiting for, because this has been a problem stated for years upon decades. And again, it never occurred to you. Also, again, wasn't popularized, wasn't promoted at all. Even though, again, amongst some of the teammates specifically, the bonds to get these deeper connections and to start to understand some of these mentally draining things in concert with one another have existed, but were rarely talked about in public until you see a documentary about a player, centered around a player, and they then dive into it there. Not to mention as well, just some former players, for example, Vontae Davis's sudden passing. All those sorts of things. All those sorts of things that you're seeing over the years. Former and present players. And you now decide, just in 2026, to do this? Okay, yeah, it's there. It is something that can help. But it's at the same time, for some of these people, in some regard, you don't get cookie points for that. You don't. This should have been a thing already. We shouldn't have had to go through this for the last few decades. When it's been clear that mental health is something generally around society that people are working to be more open about. All the different initiatives that are promoting that safe and open space to discuss these kinds of things. There's been an overall shift in that. Going back a good few years. So, we're just making this now? And then you get into the component of the numbers. Now, I will say that even with the one mental health physician in there, it's not a guarantee that each and every single player is going to need to utilize them. Some players are genuinely fine with where they're at and not truly dealing with anything. Even when they're open and honest about their life experiences, their struggles, especially in the mental health realm, may not really exist all that much. And so they might genuinely be fine and content with just living the way that they have. There are others who might be dealing with that same kind of thing, but genuinely feel as though they have the support around them already. Whether it be a family member, whether it be a close friend of theirs that doesn't play the sport but has some sort of close connection to them, whether it be a spouse, a partner, hell, even one of their own therapists that they might have access to, whether it be one specifically for the family or whether it just be for their own individual sake. They might already get that kind of care, and so might not have to worry all the time about going specifically to this one person in the club to talk about these issues. They already have it. But just on the logistical side of things, and this is from my own personal standpoint, I don't know if one is enough. Now again, this is something that can also be expanded upon years down the line. But for one person, you're asking one person per club to take on therapy work and care for differing personalities, all dealing with varying levels of mental health. One, it might not always work out like that. When you have these team practices going on and things like that, you're not always going to get access to each and every single one of those people. They have different reps that they're trying to fill out. They have different assignments that they're trying to work on. You're not going to catch all of them in one fell swoop. And considering how sensitive, how deep some of that information can go, that could be seen as a good thing, but that can also be seen as a bad thing, especially if there is very dangerous information being relayed here. In that event, you want to get back to that person as soon as possible. You don't want to have to wait for all this stuff to go down, and you don't want to be the person who had a opportunity to change the entire outcome and then end up being too late with the result of something like a death in this situation. You don't want to be caught in that kind of crossfire as a mental health physician or a family member, as we've explained. So that's just kind of a big risk here. And then also, for the physician themselves, going back to that notion about taking on all those different personalities, that content can get heavy. You think that one person per club, and we don't have a number on how many people are dealing with these mental health problems per organization, because again, the reality is that sometimes it is so underlying, it is so deep-seated within a person that you genuinely wouldn't know. You genuinely wouldn't be able to tell in some cases. In others, it's outright. And that makes the matter just as, if not even more, urgent. So there are a number of different ways. It's a complex phenomena overall. Very complex. And it can affect different people in different ways. And you've got to have a mental note of all of that in one brain. That's a lot to keep track of. It is. So I just, I don't know. That's something that they're going to have to tweak in years to come. I get the strong feeling about that, because that's a lot of pressure and a whole lot of weight to put on one person. It truly is. And you're restricting the limit to just one for each team. It's not meant to be perfect, but like, what? That has all the makings of a logistical nightmare. To move into a few other developments, though. The Vikings exercised the 5th-year option on Jordan Addison. Ben Lynn. Yes, Ben Lynn. I think that he is like, all you have to know is that he acquired a 1% stake of the Dolphins. And I think somebody was pointing it out in the comment section as well. Paid a good amount of money just to get that 1% entry stake. But if the Dolphins continue to head in the right direction, which they intentionally may not for at least the next couple years, then they could be smooth sailing, and the full amount of profit that could come from investing in that percentage could pay this person handsomely. So we will see. The Titans would sign KJ Osborn to a 1-year deal. And then the fucking Raiders would sign Kirk Cousins. Earlier today. Yeah, they signed Kirk Cousins. You get the reports that, hey, Mendoza's the consensus number 1 overall pick. He's going to meet with Las Vegas. He's already met with Las Vegas. He's their guy. But just to have some security, just to have a little bit of stability at that quarterback position, we're going to sign Kirk Cousins. Yeah. And not only sign Kirk Cousins, as everybody says at this point, like, yo, whoever his fucking agent is needs to be studied, because the nigga is a flat out genius. Just hear this for a second without the context. We're talking about a Kirk Cousins who has struggled to be even a mid-level quarterback for the past few seasons, a Kirk Cousins who is literally coming off of an injury-riddled past few years in Atlanta after being paid a 4-year, $180 million deal, fully guaranteed, and then inevitably having to be restructured a little bit because he was not playing up to par for that caliber of contract, consistently flip-flopping the job between he and Michael Penix Jr. And they still made the decision, even with still having the flip-flop between he and Michael Penix Jr., to release Kirk Cousins at the start of this league year. That Kirk Cousins got paid with a 5-year, $172 million contract. What? That is mental. There is absolutely no reason on earth to be paying that man all that goddamn money. If you're taking that into consideration, you just got yourself out of a bad deal with Geno Smith, which you still have to pay off, and then you go out there and you hand over Kirk Cousins the big bucks. But this isn't even the biggest slap in the face to me, because again, I told you that without the context. The guaranteed money in the contract matters a lot. And the guarantee for this deal is only 1 year and $20 million guaranteed. Big slap in the face. Because from their perspective, at that point, what the fuck is a veteran minimum? Yeah, we're going to send off one bridge quarterback. We're going to clear a path for the clear-cut number one guy in Fernando Mendoza. And we're going to go all out, balls to the wall. $20 million flat in 1 season worth of annual salary for another mid-level backup bridge guy in Kirk Cousins. You look at him, you look at the fact that a guy like Russell Wilson, no disrespect to Russell Wilson also got a 1-year, $20 million deal flat. They didn't have to fluff up the contract to add in a fucking $152 million more dollars in 4 years. There was no reason to do it. So if that is the mentality in the first place, to have Kirk Cousins in to potentially pass the reins over, or at the very least, hold the clipboard on the sideline and mentor Fernando Mendoza in his time as a potential starter first year, you're paying $20 million for the man to hold the fucking clipboard? What the fuck do you need to do that for? And again, the Raiders to this point, they've had a solid offseason, but this is just like, what the fuck? What did you need to do this for? You could get Kirk Cousins for way cheaper than that. And if he wouldn't sign for less, then don't worry about getting him. You don't do that to yourself. You can invest that kind of money, even with the sole $20 million contract this year. You could put that in another position. You can invest that in another position, man. Go get yourself another cornerback. Go get yourself another safety or something. Don't worry about fucking Kirk Cousins in that situation. That's too much. That's expensive. Like this, literally, in Atlanta, again, over the past couple seasons, injury riddled as they might have been, the man had 28 touchdowns, 21 interceptions, led the NFL in interceptions in 2024, and completed 65% of his passes. That to you is worth $20 million in 1 season? and a fluffed up contract to inflate the numbers even further in an offseason where Kyler Murray signed for less, in an offseason where Tua Tagovailoa signed for less. Just think about that for a second. And again, it's inconsistent as they've been as quarterbacks over the past few years. In at least one occasion, each of those guys have put together a better season than Kirk Cousins has. So what the fuck? That does not make sense. Context matters. Obviously, they're on the younger end, and they stagnated in the direction that their teams were headed towards. They were seeking to be contenders by this point, and they have far from reached that. Well, what the hell makes you think that they had Kirk Cousins reach that same mark over the past few years in the back end of his career? Because Minnesota, they were supposed to be title contenders in 2022. Well, how'd that fare for them? Of course, 2023, he goes out with the season-ending injury at near the halfway point, and that's a lost season. They still decide to move on from him and go get Sam Darnold. And then he signs in Atlanta, potentially to uplift their ceiling, and the Falcons just remained to be mediocre at best, still not good enough to win a weak NFC South. So he is far underperformed in regards to the expectations here. And you're paying him $20 million a year as a team that's trying to rebuild, get yourself back into some sense of relevancy and potential contention in the division first, then the playoffs. Baby steps, right? You could just take on his contract as a bridge player and give him far less than that. Even if you're restricting it to the 1 year. $20 million is insane. It's crazy work. And then for the final piece of news today, detailed by Adam Schefter and many other sources, Stephon Gilmore would officially retire from the NFL after 13 seasons. Now, for context, Gilmore was last in the league in 2024. I believe that he was with the Vikings at that time. And in the season previous, he'd been with the Cowboys as well. So, all things considered, the last few years of his career saw him in some pretty weird stops. And, while he still had a little bit of the same skill in Minneapolis, it was clear that he tailed off a lot. For a person who was never really a fast cornerback, he didn't really rely on his speed to perform at a high level, but it is clear that he was much slower at that time. And in terms of being able to process everything that's going down on an NFL field as well, the IQ was still there, but the ability to react in real time also diminished by that point. Not to the extent that he was a full liability out there, but it's like, you want some fresher legs if you are the Vikings. And so he hadn't been in the NFL after the 2024 season. I don't even know if he was really putting in an effort to get back in the league. Nevertheless, nobody called his phone. He didn't suit up last year at all. And I guess with how, he was perceiving that, one thing could have led to another. Gilmore has traditionally been a person that doesn't really Gilmore is not a player that's always been in the spotlight like that. Like, he's traditionally kept to his own self in his own surroundings. He's not really with all that. So you hadn't heard about Gilmore in a while to this point. Like, there was genuinely no noise about him whatsoever or again any ploy to get back in the NFL. Of course, if he had it his way, he would probably still want to play the sport. But I don't think there was enough on his end to so intently pursue another shot on an NFL roster. Can't blame him for making the decision. When it is all said and done, again, Stephon Gilmore, in the same way that I said it with Darius Slay Jr., and especially when I was talking about him, because this was the correlation that I made, Gilmore will also go down as one of the better cornerbacks in the 2010s. And he so happened to get some accolades along with that. Well regarded as a shutdown corner and a tactician on that side of the field, wherever it was that he was playing. 5-time Pro Bowler, 2-time All-Pro selection, and a Super Bowl champion, along with winning the Defensive Player of the Year award in 2019. Ranking him, at that point, as one of the best consensus defenders in the league, point blank period. In that season with the Patriots, he had 6 interceptions along with 2 pick sixes and a league-leading 20 pass deflections. Just a versatile unit at that position. They called the man Gilly Lock for a reason. And even when you look at his handle on Instagram, Bump and Run Gilmore, this is what he was doing to wide receivers for the duration of that time. Even if the past few years wouldn't suggest it to you. And again, keep in mind, he'd been doing all right in Buffalo. Yet, to just drive the wedge in that Bill squad at the time, in an era where they seemed to have that occasional high-performing player, then lose out on retaining their services. Like 2012, you consider a few years before that, they lose Marshawn Lynch to the Seahawks, and look what happened. You have Stephon Gilmore performing at a good level for that roster and puts up a solid 2016 season, getting himself a Pro Bowl selection, the first of his career, having 5 interceptions as well as 48 combined tackles on the year, along with 12 pass deflections. Solid season for a corner, I'd say. You still lose out to him as he goes to your sworn division rival and a Patriots team that had been owning the AFC East literally since the turn of the century at that point. And he just added even more suffocating defense to the outside. You know, it was a symbiotic relationship with that Patriots team. By no means, especially in that specific era of Patriots football, their edge rushing in terms of household names outside of Vince Wilfork, who was on his way out via retirement, they didn't really have that household name at that position. When you go from 2017 onward, you get some names like Josh Uche, like Taco Charlton, but nothing too crazy there. Yet, they were serviceable enough to keep offensive players on their toes. Then you had to deal with a back end in terms of linebackers that were probably a bit more solid in your Deontay Hightowers in the game. And then that secondary, already legendary as it was, with guys like Patrick Chung, like Logan Ryan holding it down as safeties on the back end, with Malcolm Butler. All right. And then you add Stephon Gilmore to the mix. You've got a full defense in rhythm, in sync. And it made them dangerous. And it prolonged their ability to continue being somewhat of a dynasty as you near the late 2010s. And they proceeded to do exactly that, making multiple Super Bowls in his time there, obviously losing to the Eagles in Super Bowl 53, 52, and then in Super Bowl 53, in a game that was potentially regarded as the worst Super Bowl of all time, they won because of their ability to completely shut down a Rams offense that had been lethal all season long. A Rams offense that had literally participated in one of the best Monday Night Football games of all time and one of the highest scoring NFL games in all history, point blank, period. So, I mean, that's a testament to just how deep they were. But yeah, I'm like that ass. And I'm not just talking out of my ass when I say that, hey, you know, in terms of pass rushing specialists, you didn't necessarily have it. You look at just reading it off. Trey Flowers, Kyle Van Noy, Dietrich Wise Jr., at a younger age, Marquise Flowers, Landon Roberts, an older 39-year-old James Harrison. Just randomly in 2017, just because. And then what? Cassius Marsh, former Seahawk. Respect Cassius Marsh Sr. Love Cassius Marsh Sr. Not a household name to most people. And still, they sustained because of that linebacking core, because of that back end that also had one of the McCourty brothers at any one time, namely Devin McCourty. You also have to group in Matthew Slater as a special teamer just because, if not, Bill Belichick will try to curse me. Man, absolutely love Matthew Slater. But that's besides the point. That was the Stephon Gilmore effect for them. Even with them being in the dynastic territory already, he prolonged the, I guess, just overall lifespan of that specific defense. And gave them a player who could literally shut down an entire side of the field. Again, not necessarily having to be the fastest, not necessarily the biggest either, but understanding the different nuances of playing the position, of understanding the different coverages and different shells, and different leverages, and different angles that he had to operate from in order to sustain that caliber of excellence. And he did that. In the same way that Darius Slade Jr. may be, I'm sure Gilmore will eventually find himself in the Hall of Fame. He might have a much better chance, depending on the class, to be a first ballot guy, but again, with some of the most recent retirements, if we get more names in there, that window could close unless they also decide to improve the number of players who can be selected in a given year from 5. And it's like they should, but hey, that's a different story for a different day. Truly great player that will definitely live on for quite some time in those organizations. But that'll do it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.